Imagine a giant with unmatched economic and military power brought to a standstill by a family feud. That, right now, is the United States. Eastern Europe is heating up. A fresh flare-up erupts in the Middle East, and the world's biggest power switch just flipped to shutdown. Is that weakness? Or is it a power control feature that Moscow and Beijing simply can't copy? Welcome to WorldView Today, where we don't just read headlines, we unpack the machinery behind them. We go past the surface to map the levers and trade-offs that make a superpower burn billions a day to political gridlock. The world order is shifting, messy, volatile, interconnected. Hotspots aren't one-offs, they're a web of pressure points that tug on each other. Today's deep dive lays out 3 shockwaves and the strategy buried inside each. US Government Shutdown, myth versus reality. We'll price the real losses and strip down the Democrat-Republican power fight. The Mediterranean and soft strategy. How terror finance piggybacks on humanitarian delegations and how narratives get engineered. The Tomahawk Red Line. President Trump's high-risk play and the military responses President Putin keeps in his back pocket. The goal, a panoramic view you won't get from straight news. Every time Washington shutters, the same question lands. How does the richest nation on earth fail to fund itself? It's a paradox, but also proof that America's liberal democracy still runs by design. In a separation of powers system, no single branch gets the keys. The president runs the executive. But spending? That's set by the people through their representatives in Congress. The point is simple. Block reckless spending, force transparency. Compare that to centralized models like Beijing. Government shutdown? Unthinkable because fiscal power is consolidated. But that stability trades away transparency and invites unilateral spending. So no, shutdowns aren't collapse. They're the visible rope pull between branches to keep the balance intact. Still, the spectacle opens a window one rivals like Russia and China love to exploit to stir doubt inside America. The healthcare immigration axis. This latest standoff? Triggered by a bruising budget fight. Democrats pushed a large package to restore and expand healthcare subsidies for undocumented immigrants. Republicans pushed back. Priorities should be border security, defense, and benefits for lawful citizens. Spending billions on people outside the tax and legal system, they argue, betrays taxpayers. To flex leverage in the Senate, Democrats leaned on a familiar tool. The filibuster politics is emergency brake. Talk long enough, drag debate out, and you can stall any bill you dislike. And to release that brake, you need 60 votes. Even with a seat edge, Republicans couldn't hit 60 thanks to Democrats plus 2 independents who vote with them. Deadlock followed. Budgets froze. The government hit pause. Pricing the shutdown the real bill. This isn't a paperwork glitch. It's an economic body blow you can count. Independent estimates say every single day of a federal shutdown wipes out about $300 million in output. Stretch that to 2 weeks, and you're looking at roughly $4.2 billion in losses. Public services halted, federal contracts delayed, markets spooked. The social toll up close. About 740,000 federal workers get furloughed without pay, families stuck in limbo, bills still due. Millions at the low end of the income ladder see delays in benefits and crucial food assistance. In public schools, free lunches for the poorest kids vanish, one of the most basic safety nets, gone. And in big cities, trash piles up, an ugly snapshot that clashes with the image of a superpower. At that point, it's not politics as usual. It's an open wound, and America's rivals are watching. Senator Rick Scott has a simple, blunt fix. No pay for lawmakers during a shutdown. It's accountability, not a soundbite. Behind the budget brawl, a power knife fight. Zoom out, and you'll see more than a 2-party scrum. There's a knife fight inside the Democratic Party. Senate Leader Chuck Schumer, normally measured, found himself squeezed. Republicans demand a deal to keep the lights on. The party's ascendant left flank demands purity, especially on healthcare subsidies for undocumented immigrants. For progressives, this isn't just a line item. It's an ideological stake in the ground, social justice as policy. If Schumer cuts a deal, he risks a revolt in primaries and a fall from power. So he chooses delay and confrontation over compromise, a public lightning rod, but a survival play with an energized base. Polarization is no longer a debate topic. It's a physical barrier that can stall the government of a superpower. When election math and personal power outrank national function, America's global position erodes. Confidence shock at home and abroad. Americans know the drill, but it still feels like a breach of trust. Congress cashes paychecks while failing the basic task: fund the government. Scott's no-pay proposal? Smart politics with a penitential edge and attempt to claw back credibility. Allies from Europe to Japan to South Korea take note. They rely on U.S. steadiness in defense and economics. A self-inflicted shutdown forces a hard question. Can we anchor our security to a government that can switch itself off? Adversaries like Russia and China call it a gift. The image hits, the influence gap opens from the Pacific to Africa, and the propaganda writes itself. American democracy is chaotic, ineffective. The costs you don't see on a balance sheet. Not everything shows up in a daily GDP ticker. Thousands of scientists and researchers at NASA and the NIH are told to stand down. Experiments stall. Launch windows slip. Milestones in disease research and space exploration go dark, not for lack of talent or tools, but because Washington turned off the lights. Non-essential cyber and intel work gets pushed back. In an age of non-stop digital probing, slowing your own defenses isn't just inefficient, it's a strategic risk. Bottom line, this isn't a quirky feature of American politics. It's a flashing warning that polarization has matured into something that can self-limit U.S. strategic power. That's no longer a domestic oddity, it's a global security problem. If you find WorldView Today useful, remember to subscribe, like, and ring the bell so we can keep the context sharp. To the Mediterranean, where geopolitics and media ops intersect. Think of the October 2 interception of the global Sumu flotilla by the Israeli Navy as more than a maritime stop. It's a case study in soft strategy and how narrative warfare is fought at scale. Humanitarian mission or strategic cover? The flotilla billed itself as aid delivery and a bid to break the Gaza blockade. Putting global climate figure Greta Thunberg out front changed the calculus instantly. This wasn't just about hulls and cargo, it was about symbolism, youth, idealism, moral urgency. From Israel's viewpoint, it looked like a coordinated provocation pressing on national security red lines. The Navy's quick move to close and neutralize the flotilla was, in their reading, a necessary assertion of sovereignty and enforcement of a cordon designed to choke terrorist logistics. The eyebrow-raising moment. Then came the detail that set off alarms. Several key figures aboard, reportedly including a member of the European Parliament, threw their phones overboard just before Israeli forces took control. If the mission is purely humanitarian and transparency is the brand, why destroy personal comms? That's not privacy hygiene, that's data annihilation. It reads less like fear of doxing, more like fear of exposure. Questioned later at the port of Ashdod, Greta hinted something was wrong, but offered no specifics. That's communications choreography: seed outrage, avoid evidence that can be litigated or forensically challenged. Follow the money. Hamas links to the flotilla. Documents: the IDF says it seized point to leadership elements of Hamas funneling support through a web of front companies to back the Sumuth operation. The claim goes further. Hamas quietly owns some vessels via backed entities such as Neptune Network, reportedly run by a Spain-based figure named Cass with direct ties to Hamas leadership. Why this matters for audiences. 2 takeaways for viewers. Iconography can be weaponized. The moral sheen of humanitarian action can become a media shield for political or military ends. Soft strategy is hard pressure by other means. In modern conflict, artillery shares the stage with algorithms and influencers. The fight is for perceptions as much as for ports. Net. Global Sumuth didn't read like a one-off charity sale. It looked like a designed soft power op, leveraging celebrity to build narrative cover for militant objectives. A White House pivot, hitting Russia where the money flows. While headlines fixate on the Middle East, a separate shock move out of Washington could redraw the war map in Eastern Europe. President Trump has greenlit a strategic shift in U.S. support for Ukraine. Leaked briefings say he signed a directive letting U.S. Intelligence directly enable Ukraine not just with dots on a map, but with targeting support for strikes deep inside Russia. Center of gravity, energy. The reported target set is blunt, Russia's energy backbone. Think refineries, major power plants, and the primary pipeline network. This isn't about craters, it's about cutting cash flow. For years, hydrocarbons have pumped roughly 40% of Moscow's federal revenues. Disrupt collection and movement, and you don't just dent hardware, you squeeze the war budget. From hold the line to press the attack. For most of the conflict, Washington stayed on the safe side of the escalatory line, arming Kyiv to defend, avoiding anything that looked like enabling strikes inside Russia. This move changes lanes. The U.S. becomes an operational enabler. Call it an admission. Sanctions, even heavy ones, haven't throttled the Kremlin's war metabolism. So Washington is leaning into physical effects through Ukrainian hands to crack logistics and finances. The board just shifted. America isn't merely coaching from the sidelines, it's on the field, accepting higher escalation risk. What it signals about Trump's strategy. Analysts read this as a deeper recalibration. Yes, Trump has talked de-escalation before, but a grinding stalemate and ignored warnings force a harder instrument. The message to Moscow: there are limits. If diplomacy and sanctions don't move you, pressure will migrate to the systems that fund your war. And to Europe, Washington will act to defend strategic order even if the risk curve steepens. The fine print, blending kinetic pressure with economic sabotage, blurs the lines between conventional war and cyber, divided by financial conflict, between a regional fight and a systemic showdown. Tomahawk, the red line, in plain sight. One more leak, one more step up the ladder. President Trump is reportedly weighing whether to hand Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine. That's not a policy tweak, it's a jump into higher-order military risk. Why Tomahawk changes the map? This isn't a generic missile. The Tomahawk is a long-range, precision strike workhorse. Range: up to 1,600 kilometers, enough for Ukraine to reach deep into Russia's interior, energy hubs, logistics nodes, hardened bases far from any front line. Punch through, designed to survive dense, layered air defenses and still land on target. Put Tomahawks in Kyiv's toolkit, and you don't just extend reach, you rewrite the targeting menu. It enables calibrated, high-value retaliation that can slip past Russia's deepest shields. Putin's message isn't theater, it's doctrine. President Putin warned that a U.S. Tomahawk transfer would count as a direct American attack on Russia. That's not bluster. It's how Moscow frames thresholds. Red line crossed. Russia has telegraphed for months that giving Ukraine long-range offensive systems that shift the strategic balance will trigger a response. Chain reaction risk. A U.S. made precision missile launched from Ukraine into Russian territory is the kind of event that can set off reflexive escalation, pulling NATO and Russia toward a confrontation no one can micromanage. What Moscow could do next? If the Tomahawk card is played, expect more than press statements. Here are the response lanes defense watchers game out. Hypersonic payback. Use Kinzhal or Zircon hypersonics to hit Ukrainian command nodes or NATO-supported infrastructure. At those speeds, interception is a coin flip at best. Squeeze the arteries. Step up strikes on supply corridors in Poland or Romania, the gateways for Western aid. That forces NATO into a brutal choice: escalate protection or watch credibility erode. Space and signals. Disrupt or disable U.S. intel and comms satellites that feed Ukraine targeting data, pushing the war into the gray zones of cyber and space where deterrence rules are fuzzy. Bottom line, the Tomahawk question nudges Europe into a new strategic era, one where guardrails can vanish in the few minutes it takes a warhead to cross a border. The uncomfortable query hanging over capitals from Warsaw to Paris. Are we ready for a fight where escalation is timed in minutes, not months? We've tracked 3 storylines that could reset the global board: Washington's shutdown drama, narrative warfare in the Mediterranean, and a perilous climb up the escalation ladder in Eastern Europe. What stalemate really means. Here's the state of play, no spin. Russia and Ukraine. Nearly 4 years in, no decisive win for Moscow. With strong backing, Kyiv still hasn't clawed back roughly 19% of occupied territory. United States, a superpower snagged by its own wiring budget showdowns that drain focus and project doubt abroad. NATO and the EU, pulled between helping Ukraine and avoiding a wider war with Russia, the Tomahawk debate tightens that vice. History rhymes. The Soviet grind in Afghanistan 1979-1989 ended only as the system cracked. Today's loop looks similar. Breaking it likely takes a shock event or a leadership move bold enough to rewrite incentives. The strategic shift in one frame. Hard plus hard. Pair direct military pressure, long-range precision, with economic targeting, Russia's energy spine. Soft as force. Humanitarian iconography and celebrity activism can function as information weapons shaping perception, buying time, eroding will. Escalation risk. If Washington crosses Moscow's red line, the old guardrails can vanish in the minutes it takes a warhead to arrive. Where this leaves the West and the world. Stalemate isn't static, it corrodes. It nudges allies to hedge, adversaries to probe, and citizens to tune out. The next phase will reward actors who can integrate military effects, economic leverage, and information discipline without tripping into a spiral no one can control. If this breakdown helped you see the board more clearly, subscribe, like, and ring the bell so you won't miss the next deep dive. Your support keeps the analysis sharp and independent. See you in the next analysis from WorldView Today.